Thank you, Mike. Well, I'm going to talk about this terraced house, primarily the first 18, but the later ones are similar variations of the same house type. First, I think I'd like to say it was a fantastic opportunity for us, this project, and thank you very much to Field and Clegg Bradley for inviting us to be part of this, and for Countryside for agreeing to it as well. And actually, it has been an amazing opportunity for us to be part of this project, which I think is very unique. And I think because of the sort of qualities and lifestyle, you can see that's very evident in the place. And there are all sorts of things. Design is maybe part of it, but there are all sorts of other things that go to making that very special, I think. So I'm going to talk about this terrace. It's a 4-story terrace house. In some ways, compared to the house types that Mike's described, is a bit more conventional. We see it very much as a contemporary reinterpretation of, the Georgian terraced house, of which large parts of Cambridge and many other cities in the UK are made. Within the master plan, it sits in a position between a front to the landscape belt of trees that runs through the center of the site, and on the other side of that is the main sort of spine route through the development. But it means to the front doors, you sort of have a footpath, and it's primarily pedestrian access. So that means to the rear, there is a mews and place for the car. So that relationship between the two is characteristic of a number of houses in the scheme, but makes it very much like that traditional house with a mews behind. And then in relation to that space, because it's not a formal street front, we wanted quite informal front doors. So we designed them with a sort of thinking for a terraced house, more of a veranda type entrance. So a space where you could sit on your porch, and actually in that porch you have 2 doors. One's the front door, and the other is a door that takes you directly into the kitchen. And this you can see sort of straight through into the living rooms of these 2 houses, with balconies that look into the tree canopies on the first floor. There are 2 different house types that the terraces form from, and that's partly because we want to have a sort of fairly uniform character to the front of these 4-story house types, but to the rear have a mews which is more varied in character. So the 2 different house types, one has a studio at the back, and the other has a larger first floor terrace. They all have garages at the ground floor level. And I sort of describe in the next slide the sort of organization of the different types, and then go through some of the images that go through that. So the typical organization of the studio type is to have the veranda at the front for the entrance, a sort of kitchen dining room on the ground floor, which leads through to a courtyard, and then a sort of length and a half garage at the back. We've felt, because there's very few other parking spaces, it's very important people be able to use their garages. So they're 1.5 times the depth of a normal garage, so there's space for other things to occur within the garage. I hope that's worked. You never know. And then on the first floor, a terrace, a studio room that's connected via a stair down to the ground floor into the rest of the house. So it could be used as an integral part of the house, but feels slightly separate. We always imagine it as being a home office or a teenager's den or a guest room. And then living over the ground and first floor, with bedrooms over the second and third floors. And there's a sort of roof terrace on the top floor that looks back into the tree canopy that is from what is potentially the master bedroom. So this is sort of the entrance, and the idea of part of the veranda was sort of exactly what people have done here. It's sort of maybe a slightly less formal place to keep your bikes, so you can chain your bikes up to the railings at the front, rather than necessarily putting your bikes in the garage at the back. And somewhere also for visitors. So then this is the entrance into the house, the kitchen and the veranda in use at the front of the house. So you catch the morning sun, the veranda with, tree canopy allowing. And then this is the view through to the courtyard, and the stair that takes you up to the roof, the terrace between the two houses. And then there's a corridor that runs down the courtyard that takes you to the garage and the studio at the back. And then on the first floor, a view from where that stair comes up, and a view out onto the terrace at first floor level and into the studio on the other side. A view from the sort of upper level landing, looking back down into the courtyard. This is one of the early sketches we did, looking at the first floor living room, which runs front to back of the dwelling, looking across the courtyard to the terrace and into the studio at the back. And a similar view in one of the completed houses, and a view from the studio at the back into that courtyard, and a view at night. Then this is the mews at the back, so you can see the relationship between the houses with the studios. The idea with the houses and the studios, there's a door as well as the garage door, so you can use it as maybe a separate entrance to the studio, although it actually goes into the garage, and then from there you go into the hallway of the house. And there's space for the bins at the back next to the door. And then this is the other type, which we call the loft type. So the idea was that this has a much more open plan arrangement between the ground floor spaces and the first floor spaces. So there's a void. Essentially, it's very similar to the first type, but the courtyard is glazed in, and the sort of means of escape from the upper floor takes you out and across the terrace at the back and down a staircase into the mews, which means you can have an open stair between the ground floor kitchen dining room and the first floor living room. And then this is the view from the above the house, looking into the gardens of the two types of houses, the room at the ground floor in that type, and a view to the terrace. I was reflecting on the fact when I was putting these slides together that I'm sure all of these kids are about to go to university by now. And then it's the view from the mews, looking up that staircase to the terrace. I noted many times I've been around, someone keeps their canoe in this space in one of the houses. And then finally, a view of the main frontage to this fantastic green belt, which has been beautifully underplanted by the landscaping grants, which I think is one of the things that really has embedded all the houses in the landscape. And certainly, I mean, these are all 10 years old, these photographs, so they don't show all the creepers climbing up this facade, which is how you see it now.